History textbooks often skip the strange turns that actually changed events. In this compilation, one incident topples a shogun, a dig is rebuilt from memory, and a dead law still draws real resistance. One incident was enough to cost a shogun his position. The Meiō incident did not stay a court matter for long. Japan's ruling elite mixed court rank with military power. In that overlap, politics could move through rooms as well as armies. The Meiō incident gave rivals an opening. They could point to the disruption and press against the shogun's authority. That pressure turned into deposition. The shogun was removed, and one political incident became a change in leadership. The image left behind was simple: a ruler gone, a court still standing, and rivals closer to the center of power. In that room, authority had a chair, and someone else took it. The excavation had to be published after its records were gone. Only photographs and memory were left to work with. At the Palazzo del Calan, the dig was interrupted by World War II. Work stopped before the findings could be fully written up. Then vandals destroyed the records, leaving photographs as the main evidence. The excavator rebuilt the publication from those images and from memory. That meant comparing photo details, notes, and remembered sequences to restore the excavation's shape. The final account came from reconstruction, not a complete archive. So the story of the Palazzo del Calan survived through a rebuilt paper trail. What remained was a publication assembled from fragments, photographs, and memory. In South Carolina, a 1998 vote to repeal an interracial marriage ban still met major opposition. More than 38% of voters said no. The ban was already unenforceable, but it remained on the books. So the referendum asked voters to remove a law that still existed on paper. That made the vote about more than enforcement. The repeal would not change daily policing, but it would erase the ban from the state code. Still, more than 38% opposed repeal. A symbolic law can keep support long after its power is gone. So the ballot did not just measure policy, it measured how long a paper ban could stay alive in public memory, beside a marked referendum card. Walter Deverell's only sold painting was bought as charity, not just for the image on the canvas. That is an unusual kind of sale. Walter Deverell was a young painter in the pre-Raphaelite circle. He had only one work that ever sold, and it was called a pet. William Holman Hunt and John Everett Millais bought a pet. The purchase was described as an act of charity for Deverell. The sale gave Deverell money, but it also showed how closely these artists watched one another. A painting could become support, not just a market object. What remained was a pet, the one painting tied to Deverell's sale. Around it sits a quiet story of artists, charity, and one careful canvas. A campaign promised a 15-minute workday and free milk taps on every street corner. The man behind it was Domingo Tortorelli, a Uruguayan perennial candidate. That means he kept entering public life again and again. His promises were extreme on purpose: a 15-minute workday, and milk taps on every street corner. They turned the campaign into a public stunt people could picture instantly. That kind of exaggeration shifted attention from policy details to performance. The campaign became a scene, not just a list of promises. What stayed behind was the image of a street corner and a milk tap. One strange promise can outlast the election itself. An Australian stood at the surrender table in Singapore. John David Rogers was there, among the uniforms and papers, in September 1945. By then, the war in the region was ending. Singapore had become the place for a formal surrender moment, where representatives gathered to mark the change. Rogers represented Australia at that ceremony. His role was not to fight there, but to stand for Australia as the surrender was formally recorded. That made Australia part of the official ending in Singapore. The moment tied one nation to the last formal steps of wartime closure in the region. So the image is simple: a table, a signature, and a uniform in September 1945. John David Rogers stood there for Australia as Singapore moved into peace. Newspapers in German settler colonies did more than report events. Their pages helped push agitation for the Herero and Nama genocide. In settler colonial Namibia, printed news reached cafes, offices, and street corners. It helped shape public messaging for German settlers. These papers were not passive observers. They amplified hostile politics and repeated agitation through headlines, notices, and editorials. That steady repetition made violence feel more normal in public life. The press environment supported the genocide instead of questioning it. What survived was not only ink on paper, it was a press culture that turned newspapers into tools of agitation, page by page. Alexander F. Worley once attacked ships he had already served on. He was no longer a sailor below deck. He was the commander on CSS Manassas. Earlier, Worley had served in the U.S. Navy as a sailor. That meant his first naval work happened on ships under one flag. Later, the war split that world apart. Then Worley commanded the ironclad ram CSS Manassas. An ironclad is a ship armored with metal plating. From that deck, he faced two ships he had once known as crew. The strange part is the transition itself. A man who began as a U.S. Navy sailor now issued orders from a Confederate ironclad. The same sea held both parts of his career. That is why Worley's name stays tied to Manassas. The ironclad, the old ships, and a sailor-turned-commander meet in one naval crossing. If these stories surprised you, the full pattern is the point. History often turns on overlooked decisions, broken records, and unexpected consequences. Subscribe for more facts that deserve a second look, and tell us which one stayed with you most.